Hey there, fellow garden enthusiast. If you've been following along here at Sensei, you know I'm all about finding simple, sustainable ways to supercharge our gardens. Today, I want to share something that's become an absolute game changer in my own backyard, burying coffee grounds underground. I know it sounds almost too simple, but trust me, once you understand what's happening beneath the soil surface, you'll never look at your morning coffee the same way again. Let me paint you a picture of what's really going on down there. When you bury coffee grounds just a few inches beneath your garden soil, you're essentially setting up an all-you-can-eat buffet that earthworms simply cannot ignore. But this isn't just about feeding worms for the sake of it. These incredible creatures are nature's soil engineers, and when they show up to feast on those grounds, they're transforming your garden in ways that surface applications just can't match. The underground method works because it places the coffee grounds directly in the earthworm's natural territory. Unlike surface applications where grounds can dry out, form crusts, or get washed away by rain, buried grounds stay moist and accessible. They break down slower and more consistently, creating a sustained food source that keeps worm populations thriving in your garden beds week after week. Here's where it gets fascinating. Earthworms are drawn to coffee grounds for several compelling reasons, and understanding this helps us use them more effectively. First, coffee grounds have a gritty texture that earthworms actually need in their digestive system. They don't have teeth, so they use small particles like coffee grounds to help grind up organic matter in their gizzard. When you bury these grounds, you're providing both food and digestive aid in one convenient package. The moisture retention is another huge factor. Buried coffee grounds act like tiny sponges in your soil, holding water in the root zone where your plants need it most. Earthworms are extremely sensitive to moisture levels, and they'll congregate in areas where humidity is optimal. By creating these moisture-rich pockets underground, you're essentially building earthworm condos throughout your garden. There's also the matter of temperature stability. Surface-applied amendments can experience wild temperature swings, but underground conditions remain relatively constant. Earthworms prefer stable environments, and the insulating effect of soil covering your coffee grounds creates ideal conditions for them to work their magic consistently, regardless of whether it's blazing hot or unexpectedly cold above ground. Now let's talk about what this means for your actual plants, because that's what we're all here for, right? When earthworms process those buried coffee grounds, they're creating something gardeners call black gold worm castings. These castings are one of the most nutrient-dense, plant-available fertilizers nature can produce. Unlike synthetic fertilizers that can burn roots if you're not careful, worm castings are gentle, yet incredibly effective. The underground placement means these nutrients are released exactly where your plant roots are actively growing and feeding. You know, when you surface apply amendments, nutrients can leach away with watering or get tied up in the top layer of soil before roots can access them. By burying coffee grounds, you're creating nutrient hotspots in the active root zone, giving your plants VIP access to everything they need. The improved soil structure is equally important, especially if you're dealing with heavy clay or sandy soil like many of us are. As earthworms tunnel through the soil to reach those buried coffee grounds, they're creating channels that improve aeration and drainage. These burrows allow plant roots to penetrate deeper and explore more soil volume, while also helping water infiltrate instead of running off. I've seen rock-hard clay soil transform into friable, workable earth within a single growing season using this method consistently. Let me walk you through exactly how I do this in my own garden, because technique matters here. First, save your coffee grounds in a container with a loose lid. I keep a small bucket under my kitchen sink and it takes about a week to fill. Don't worry about them getting a bit moldy. That's actually beneficial as it kickstarts decomposition. When I'm ready to apply them, I use a trowel or small shovel to create trenches or holes about 4 to 6 inches deep between my plants. Spacing is important. I aim for about 12 to 18 inches between application spots. Drop a handful of grounds into each hole, then cover them back up with soil. The key is to make sure they're completely buried so they stay moist and don't attract surface pests. Timing-wise, I do this every 2 to 3 weeks throughout the growing season. You don't want to overdo it because coffee grounds are relatively high in nitrogen, and while that's great for leafy growth, you need balance. For fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers, I reduce applications once they start flowering to avoid excessive foliage at the expense of fruit production. One pro tip I've learned through trial and error: pre-moisten your coffee grounds before burying them if they've dried out during storage. This jump-starts microbial activity and gets earthworms interested faster. I'll often mix them with a bit of finished compost too, which adds even more beneficial microorganisms to the party. After you start this practice, give it about 2 to 3 weeks before you start seeing results. You'll notice earthworm castings appearing on the soil surface near where you buried the grounds. That's your sign that the worm population is thriving and actively working your soil. Within a month or two, you should see noticeably healthier plant growth with deeper green foliage and more vigorous root development. One thing to watch is pH levels, especially if you have acid-loving plants. Despite the myth that coffee grounds are highly acidic, used grounds are actually fairly neutral, typically ranging from 6.5 to 6.8 pH. However, if you're concerned, test your soil periodically and adjust as needed. I've never had issues, but every garden is unique. Also, be mindful not to create thick layers of coffee grounds in any one spot. A handful per location is plenty. Too much organic matter in one concentrated area can actually create anaerobic pockets where beneficial earthworms won't venture. Think of it like seasoning food. A little distributed throughout makes everything better, while dumping it all in one spot, well, it ruins the dish. This underground coffee ground method has honestly revolutionized how I approach soil fertility. Instead of spending money on expensive fertilizers or amendments, I'm recycling something I produce daily anyway. The earthworm population in my garden has exploded. My soil structure improves every season, and my plants are healthier than they've ever been. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity and sustainability. You're not fighting against nature or trying to force quick fixes. You're working with natural soil biology, feeding the organisms that have been improving soil for millions of years, and letting them do what they do best. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe to Sensei for more practical, no-nonsense gardening tips that actually work. Share this with your fellow gardeners who might be drowning in coffee grounds and looking for a better use than the compost pile. Let's grow together and keep sharing what works in our gardens. Until next time, keep digging deeper and growing smarter.